401. Mordor Stealth. No matter how Sauron's dark power probed, it was stopped cold by the force of Dewey's artifact. He could not find a single opening. How can this be? Sauron's voice boomed, his eyes flashing with a baleful red light as he stared at Dewey in disbelief. By all logic, any ring forged using the ring-making techniques he had taught should contain a back door, an avenue he could exploit to bend it to his will. Yet with this device before him, there was nothing. It was as if this creation existed outside the web of his influence. Although the craftsmanship owed much to Sauron's methods, it had already grown beyond his control. Even if he reclaimed the One Ring now, he could not touch this new work. Dewey watched Sauron's shock and snorted coldly. He had expected this. If he dared to forge such an object, he would not leave it vulnerable. In addition to studying Sauron's ring-forging techniques, he had woven in alchemy and goblin smithing. He had used an ancient artifact to call forth two legendary artisans, Celebrimbor, the maker associated with the Rings of Power, and Fëanor, the creator of the Silmarils. Under their guidance, over decades, Dewey had crafted a new ring, born of Sauron's methods but shielded against Sauron's touch. No matter how much Sauron refused to accept it, the truth was plain. The ring could not be influenced by him. The realization unnerved the Dark Lord. He had always trusted his ringcraft and been determined to seize the One Ring to dominate the other rings. Now an uncontrollable object had appeared, and his look toward Dewey was full of murderous intent. He sought to annihilate the anomaly, take the ring, and learn why it defied him. With that ruthless determination, Sauron hurled the full weight of his power at the ring, attempting to shatter its protection. His assault was terrifying. Dark power surged like an endless tide against the golden light that the ring cast, a small island beset by monstrous waves and tsunamis. Yet the golden dome that rose around Dewey stood unbroken. It was rooted to the earth like a mountain, unshaken by the onslaught. Dewey wore the ring and poured earth power into it, continuously reinforcing the dome. He planted himself on the ground, letting the land itself become his support and share the burden of Sauron's ferocity. The earth trembled, fissures opened into bottomless chasms, boulders tumbled, and rivers reversed their flow. Meanwhile, Gandalf, Galadriel, and Elrond fought to purge the rings of power of the Dark Lord's contamination. When they could not cleanse them, they sealed the compromised rings away, freeing themselves to oppose Sauron directly. Even without the ring's aid, they remained among Middle-earth's greatest champions. Gandalf struck his staff to the earth, and a yawning crack split the plain toward the enemy. Countless orcs, trolls, and wights tumbled into the abyss before the chasm closed again. Elrond leaped like a great warrior, blade flashing, and aimed a devastating strike at Sauron. Glorfindel flared with radiant light and attacked from the opposite side with twin blades. Galadriel's very bearing changed. The elegant elven lady drew a longsword from a hidden space and, like a Valkyrie, cast herself into close combat. Dewey stared in surprise at the sight of Galadriel, transformed into such a fearsome fighter. The noble facade belied the steel within. He did not hesitate. Dewey joined the assault, besieging Sauron with the others while using the ring to shield them all. While the titanic battle raged on the plains of Eriador, events elsewhere moved swiftly. Frodo, who had stayed in Lothlorien, received the signal to depart. With Sauron drawn west of the Misty Mountains, Frodo felt the chance to act and wasted no time. He bade farewell to Lord Celeborn and, with Sam, activated the port key. It transported them to the eastern border of Gondor, near the Cirith Ungol Pass in the Ephel Duath. Close enough to Mordor that once through the pass they could slip into its heart and ultimately reach Mount Doom. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli arrived there too via Portkey and met Frodo and Sam. Though much of Sauron's host had marched out, Mordor remained deadly. The Cirith Ungol Guard was thick with orcs. Minas Morgul, which Dewey had once burned, still held a garrison. Flocks of crows and colossal bats scoured the skies. Vampires, wargs, dark sorcerers, Uruk-hai, trolls, giant spiders, and other fell creatures prowled the land. Above Barad-dûr, the ever-watchful Flaming Eye, Sauron's avatar, swept the region. Any anomaly might be seen and reported to his main body. The land was a minefield. One misstep could mean annihilation. The five of them, Aragorn, Frodo, Sam, Legolas, and Gimli, huddled behind a huge rock, ducking as a patrol of crows went by. Peering out, they took in the heavily defended pass and paled. "What are we to do?" Frodo whispered, anxiety tightening his voice. "There are so many orcs, we can't simply fight our way through." "Why not?" Gimli growled, hefting his axe. "We'll smash a path." Legolas shook his head and notched an arrow. "No, I can try to slip past them. If I move quick and silent, I might take enough out to clear a way." Aragorn held up a hand to stop them. "We have to get in without attracting notice. If Mordor realizes what we're doing, we're finished." "Then how do we pass the pass without setting off an alarm?" Gimli demanded. Aragorn was silent for a moment, thinking. Then he withdrew a small bottle from his pouch. "What is it?" Sam asked, curiosity overcoming him. "It's a polyjuice potion," Aragorn said. "Lord Duir gave it to us before we left, said it might prove useful. We can use it to take on orcish forms and blend in." Their faces lit at the suggestion, a possible way to slip through unseen. But a faint rustle behind them put them instantly alert. Legolas's keen ears pricked. He whirled around, bow drawn, and spoke in a low, hard voice. "Who's there?" Noticing Legolas move, the others snapped to alert and raised their weapons. Something in the shadow had stirred, faint, skittering steps, and Legolas, sharp-eyed, loosed an arrow without hesitation. A startled cry sounded as a thin, small creature twisted away from the shaft and tumbled into the open. They all stared. The thing was like nothing they had seen. Sallow skin, huge, bulging eyes, and a mouth full of sharp teeth. Suspicion and surprise hardened their faces. "What on earth is that?" Sam whispered, tense and bewildered. Legolas's expression flickered with recognition, then closed into a frown. He did not lower his bow. "I remember it," he said quietly. "It appeared in Mirkwood decades ago, looking for something. It escaped when our warriors pursued it." "It turned up in Mirkwood before? And now it's here. Could it be an agent of Sauron?" Frodo asked, unease edging his voice. Everyone felt the same. This was near Mordor. Any non-human thing here was suspect. Gimli tightened his grip on his axe, eyes hard. "Whatever it is, chop it down." The creature, or creature's owner, was quicker than it looked. It scrambled back on all fours, a thin, whining voice begging, "Don't kill Gollum. Gollum is not of Mordor. Gollum is ordered by the black-robed wizard to lead you." The name made them pause. Aragorn motioned to Legolas and the others to hold, then stepped forward and peered into the pale, furtive eyes. "Is the black-robed wizard you speak of Lord Duir?" he asked. Gollum nodded so wildly his whole body shook. "Yes, Duir, the terrible wizard." Then, as if proof would make them believe, he thrust out a scrawny arm and showed a dark pattern on his skin. "Look, the mark the black-robed wizard left. Gollum's master is the black-robed wizard." They saw it, a dark sigil on his wrist, the mark of the two trees, the emblem of the gold and silver trees of Hogwarts. The sight of it eased some of their suspicions. The mark was not Sauron's sign. Still, Frodo pressed on. "You say Duir ordered you to lead us. Do you know a way to get into Mordor?" At Frodo's voice, Gollum's gaze sharpened. Something greedy and feverish flashed in his eyes. His body crept instinctively nearer. "Precious! My precious!" Frodo stepped back, alarmed. Aragorn and the others tensed again. Aragorn put Narsil's edge before Gollum's throat in warning. The sight of a blade and the others' raised weapons sobered the creature. It shrank away, making itself small and pitiable. "Answer Frodo's question, you little beast," Sam snapped, full of distrust. He had no doubt what Gollum coveted. His hatred for the thing was plain. Gollum shivered, miserable and eager at once. "Gollum has lain near Mordor a long time. Gollum knows a secret passage that can get you safely into Mordor." After a wary discussion, the Fellowship, though still suspicious, decided to accept Gollum as guide. He led them away from the Cirith Ungol checkpoints and into the jagged foothills that lay like teeth on the edge of Shelob's domain. Gollum darted ahead, stealing anxious, hungry glances at Frodo as he walked, searching for any sign of the ring. Aragorn, Legolas, and the others noticed every furtive look and grew more watchful. Gollum's face was a map of clashing wills, one side sly and venomous, the other cowed and trembling. "Lead them to the spider. Let her eat them. Then the precious comes back to us," he muttered under his breath, greedy intent in his eyes. Then he recoiled, shaking his head as if punished by thought. No, the wizard will punish us. He will make the mark burn." He stared at the sigil on his arm with a hatred that bordered on fear. He had tried to remove it 100 times and failed. Wherever he fled, whenever the wizard willed it, the mark would grow and writhe, sending into his flesh a torment like 1,000 needles. Two minds warred in him, and for the moment the cunning one held sway. "We're taking them to the secret entrance," he said in a thin voice, trying to persuade himself as much as any listener. "We only forgot to say there is a giant spider nearby. It's not our fault, is it?" They threaded through narrow passes and clambered over broken rock, skirting flocks of scouting birds and bats. As they drew closer to Shelob's lair, impatience and excitement lit Gollum's face. Aragorn, alert always to danger, saw it and felt a prickle of unease. He slowed and listened. "Something's wrong," he said softly. "It's too quiet. The air here has gone heavier." He also saw Gollum hesitate, trying to slip ahead or off the path. Aragorn moved quickly. With a small, practiced motion, he drew a thin chain from his cloak and wrapped it about the creature's wrist, holding him fast. His eyes were cold as stone. "Where do you think you're going, Gollum?" The chain and that cold look sent panic through Gollum. He shrank back, twisting his neck. "Gollum!" Gollum wanted to see if danger lay ahead. "Let poor Gollum go, please. Gollum is so uncomfortable." Aragorn did not believe a word. He pressed Narsil's point to the creature's neck and spoke flatly. "You will keep to our side and have no schemes. Try anything, and I will cut your head off. And don't think of fleeing. Stay where we can see you. If you lead us into danger, I'll put you in front." The threat broke him. Gollum nodded frantically, and bound by the chain and by fear, led them on to the secret entrance as he had promised. They did not mean to seek the spider that day. But Shelob had her own reasons for leaving the lair. With the armies of Mordor recently consuming more of the land, the food that used to be left for her had grown thin. Driven by hunger, the great spider stirred from her lair to hunt. 403. Enter Mordor. A house-sized spider filled the pass, and every face went white. Gollum slipped away in the confusion, vanishing into shadows. Frodo and Sam crouched behind Aragorn and Legolas. Gimli swung his battle-axe and hacked at one of Shelob's legs, but it rang as if on iron. Sparks flew, and the sound was of metal on stone. Shelob paid no mind to the dwarf. Drawn, perhaps, by the One Ring, her hunger was fixed on Frodo. With a single flick, she sent Gimli flying and lunged toward the hobbits. Legolas loosed a light arrow, but it glanced off Shelob's lacquered carapace without finding purchase and only made her angrier. She hissed and struck out at Legolas with hooked chelicerae. The elf bounded between boulders, shooting another volley of light arrows at the spider's many vulnerable eyes. Aragorn attacked as well, sword flashing. His blade kept Shelob cautious. She flinched away from it, unwilling to press forward while he stood at the ready. For a time they tangled her. Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli forced her attention. Frodo and Sam, hardly fighters, could only crouch and watch, hearts in their mouths. The tide turned when Gimli was thrown clear. His axe became wrapped in sticky silk, and Aragorn's sword, too, was bound by threads that deflected their blows. Arrows and strikes did little to the monstrous shell. Frodo could not keep still. "No, we have to do something," he blurted. "Frodo, Aragorn said you're the most important. If it's dangerous, you must get away," Sam hissed, dragging him back. But Frodo would not abandon them. He pulled Sting from his belt, Bilbo's old blade, and drew from his pocket the small file Dewar had given him. He ran toward Shelob, the spider's eyes fixed on him as on prey. She abandoned the others and rushed. "Frodo, get back!" Aragorn shouted. Legolas fired a dozen light arrows in rapid succession to slow her, but Shelob's sighs swallowed their light. Frodo could feel his fear like ice, but he took a steadying breath and shook the file. The darkness sensed by the little glass answered. The file burst with a fierce, holy radiance. The light was like a blade of day. Shelob recoiled, screeching, and stayed her advance. Frodo pressed forward with the file held high. The spider writhed and lashed, trying to close, but the shining kept her at bay. Aragorn seized the opening. By apparition, he was at once at her abdomen and drove his sword into a soft spot beneath the shell. Shelob shrieked, flung off the attackers, and fled like a shadow, vanishing back into the entrance of her lair. For a long moment, no one moved. Then, exhausted exhalations broke the silence. "Well done, Frodo," Aragorn said, clapping the hobbit's shoulder with a grim, warm smile. Legolas and Gimli looked at Frodo as if seeing him anew. Sam's face was all admiration. Frodo's cheeks colored. The light in the phial was already fading. "It was this, the phial Dwyer gave me, that drove her off," he said. They all glanced at the small glass and nodded. Dwyer's gift had been their salvation. The defensive items they carried had kept them alive through terrible odds. There was no time to linger. Such clamor might well draw the forces of Mordor. Gollum, who had fled earlier, had been tracked down by Aragorn's charm. They had all seen enough to know his intent. He had tried to lead them into Shelob's den. Angry hands rose. Gimli's axe gleamed as he threatened to take the creature's head. Aragorn and Frodo intervened. "Frodo, you decide," Aragorn said. He would not make the call for the ring-bearer. Gimli and the others fell quiet. The wretched thing trembled, sniveling when he heard Frodo would judge him. Frodo's anger was real. Gollum's treachery had nearly cost them their lives, but he shook his head. "We need him to find the way into Mordor. He's still useful. We can't kill him." "Gollum knows the way to Mordor. Don't kill Gollum," the creature wailed, eyes streaming. He looked at Frodo with the most pitiful entreaty he could muster. Aragorn's sword, still stained with Shelob's dark blood, was pointed at him. "You'd better not try anything again," he warned, voice low. "If you do, there will be no mercy." Gollum's fear was plain. He stammered promises and oaths. Aragorn, unwilling to trust mere words, produced an elven rope, thin, strong, and strange, able to stretch and contract as needed. He looped one end around Gollum's neck and gave the other to Sam. Bound and under watch, Gollum led them into a hidden cleft and down a long, cramped, dark stair. They climbed for most of the day before emerging before the Tower of Cirith Ungol on the eastern shoulder of the Mountains of Shadow. From their concealment behind boulders, they watched the tower and its watchmen, Orcs, Uruk-hai, mill about. The last checkpoint before Mordor lay before them. "What do we do?" Legolas whispered. "Wait for nightfall and slip past? Or take Gollum's suggested detour?" Aragorn scouted the approaches and shook his head. "A detour will more than double our distance and invite mischance. Our goal is Mount Doom. The sooner we arrive, the better. Waiting here in the open is dangerous too." He smiled then, and from his cloak he produced a small bottle. "I have another plan. We can go openly and not stand out, disguise ourselves as orcs and walk the road." They blinked at the potion. Legolas raised an eyebrow. "The potion needs orc hair to bind the disguise. Where would we get that?" Aragorn's smile grew no smaller. "I prepared for that. I collected some orc hair back in Gondor. 404. Disguise and infiltrate with the polyjuice potion. Their chances of sneaking into the heart of Mordor had risen dramatically." Aragorn divided the bottle into 5 portions and dropped in a hair from 5 different orcs. The potion looked an eerie green, flecked with orc hair, and it gave off a foul, clinging smell. Everyone recoiled. "Ugh, this smells awful. Like my old man's socks that haven't been washed in half a year," Gimli complained, swallowing his portion in a single gulp and gagging. Legolas, who was particularly sensitive to filth, went pale as if he'd tasted poison. Aragorn frowned and sipped his potion cautiously, as if unaffected by the stench. Frodo and Sam pinched their noses and forced the potion down, both doubled over, retching and with tears streaming from the effort. Within moments, Frodo felt his heart pound, heat rush through his body, his bones stretch, and his height increase. He was suddenly 2 or 3 times taller. His clothes that had fit perfectly were now tight, like a child's garments on an adult frame. Aragorn, Legolas, Gimli, and Sam underwent the same rapid changes. Only Gollum watched with bulging eyes, incredulous, as they turned into stout, ugly orcs. "Ha! Pointy ears, you look ridiculous. Want a mirror?" the orc Gimli jeered at Legolas. Even as an orc, Legolas moved with the same uncanny grace and retained an air of elegance that made his new form look wrong. He rolled his eyes and shot back. "You don't look much better yourself." Their bickering had never vanished since they had sparred in the Pelennor fields, but their bond had grown. Frodo marveled at their transformed faces, then caught an immediate problem. "Our voices haven't changed," Aragorn nodded. "Polyjuice changes appearance, not voice. If we mingle with orcs and speak in our own tones, we'll be exposed. So don't speak ever once we're among them." Legolas agreed. "Most of Mordor's people use the black speech. If we answer in other tongues, it'll raise suspicion." "Then we'll be mute," Sam said. "We can use simple hand signals to talk to one another. That way nobody will notice." "Good plan," they all agreed. Aragorn added, "and change your manner." "Legolas, Keep your grace under wraps. Study how orcs move and act. Roughen your bearing. Frodo, Sam, make your gaze harder. Orcs are cruel. They don't have timid, sheepish eyes. He had noticed Legolas's unquenchable elegance and wanted it hidden. Gimli needed no instruction. He was more savage than most orcs already. Aragorn waved his wand and transformed their clothes into tattered animal skins. He further disguised their weapons, turning them into the battered, rusty scrap metal arms typical of ordinary orcs. Gimli stomped impatiently. Are we ready? Can we go now? Aragorn surveyed them, then shook his head. Not yet. Orcs are never this clean. Get dirty. He rolled in the dust first, covering himself in grime. The others followed. Aragorn rummaged in his pouch and produced a small bottle filled with black pellets. When he opened it, an unspeakable reek burst out. They all gagged and backed away as if hit by the foulest manure. What is that? I'm going to be sick, Gimli cried, clamping a hand over his nose. Aragorn nearly grimaced, but forced himself to explain. A product from a novelty shop in Diagon Alley, a dung bomb. Peeves supposedly invented them. When broken, they foul your scent, and it's very hard to wash off quickly. Wargs and other Mordor beasts have a keen sense of smell. Even in orc form, we might be sniffed out. We need these to mask our true scent. Reluctant though they were, everyone knew he was right. One by one, they crushed a pellet and smeared the paste over themselves. The stench intensified. Even Gollum recoiled. Legolas and the others went ashen from the smell and fought to keep from vomiting, terrified of losing the effects of the polyjuice. The dung bomb turned out to be far worse than the potion, truly a crude biological weapon. If used in quantity, it could render a whole army useless without a single casualty. Gradually, after enough exposure, the smell became bearable, and they prepared to move out. What about Gollum? Someone asked. All eyes fell on the crouched creature. Gollum knew the routes in Mordor and could lead them to Mount Doom, but he could also betray them. He had once tried to take them into Shelob's lair and clearly lusted after the ring. If he turned traitor among the orcs, the mission would fail. Gollum huddled in a corner, trembling and pitiful. Aragorn looked at Frodo. You decide. Feeling pity, Frodo said, Take him. We need his guidance. Fine, Aragorn answered. But to stop him from giving us away, we'll use a langlock to make him silent for now. We'll pose as an orc patrol that captured him and is taking him to Barad-dûr. Aragorn cast the langlock, binding Gollum's tongue, then tied him with rope. Disguised as orcs, they descended the slope and joined the road. Aragorn, the orc at the front, led the way, with Legolas and Gimli at his sides, and the rest following behind, masked and mute as they slipped toward Mordor. The three of them formed a protective circle, sheltering Frodo and Sam, now disguised as orcs, in the center. Gollum trailed behind, a rope tied around his neck and held obediently by Sam. The Tower of Cirith Ungol was the last checkpoint before Mordor. From here, a great road ran north toward Barad-dûr. Without the polyjuice potion, Frodo and the others would never have dared to take the main road. They would have followed Gollum's directions, skirting the route by heading north along the canyon on the eastern side of the Mountains of Shadow. But now, disguised as orcs, they walked openly, swaggering down the road without fear. The tower was garrisoned by thousands of orcs and Uruk-hai, and when Frodo's group arrived, they drew little attention, except for Gollum, who was being led on a rope. An Uruk-hai stepped forward to block them. Who are you, and what is that little thing? He demanded in black speech. Frodo and the others tensed. Legolas and Gimli readied themselves to fight. Gollum trembled, eyes wide with terror, whimpering. Aragorn answered in a low, gravelly voice, part respect, part menace. We're a patrol. We caught this little one as a suspect and are taking him to Barad-dûr for imprisonment and questioning. The Uruk-hai, bred by Saruman to be stronger than ordinary orcs, held higher status in Mordor. He opened his mouth to say more. But then a gust of wind brought the stench from Aragorn and the others to his face. His expression changed instantly. He clapped a hand over his nose and recoiled in disgust. Filthy, lowly orcs. Did you eat filth? Get lost. Bleth. The Uruk-hai drove them off at once. Even those who paid no mind to hygiene could not stand such a stench. They wanted to be as far away as possible. The other guards, both Uruk-hai and orcs, smelled it too and shied away. Seen as if they had crawled out of a cesspool, Aragorn's party passed through the tower without further trouble and took the road toward Mount Doom. Far to the west, on the blasted field of Eriador, the battle between Dewey, Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond, Glorfindel, and Sauron had raged for 3 days and 3 nights. The earth itself was scarred by the aftershocks of their clash. Gandalf thrust his staff skyward and called lightning down at Sauron, but Sauron met it with his mace and shattered the bolt that hit him. Elrond was battered. His elven longsword had been broken in 2 by Sauron, and now he fought with the flame sword lent to him by Dewey. The light around Glorfindel had dimmed, but his spirit remained unbowed. He fought with a weapon Dewey had given him, too. Galadriel held 41, a divine bow gifted by the Blue Wizard, famed for never missing and for its great power. In her hands, it unleashed its full might. She knocked the silver arrow with easy grace. Chanting elven spells, she loosed bolts of radiant light that streaked toward Sauron like falling stars. Those arrows were locked onto him. However he dodged, they would not cease until they struck. Dewey bore the 24 and 45, transforming them into a golden shield of light that fused with the earth itself. While shielding his companions, he shaped the ground. Boulders and soil writhed and became spiked earth drakes that roared and lunged at Sauron, shaking the whole ground. With the 24, Dewey was lord of the land, rendering his enemies with no footing. One of Galadriel's arrows felled Sauron's monstrous mount, which was then swallowed by the fissures Dewey ripped open in the earth. Sauron stood in that void, and though he felt the combined assault of the others, he was not greatly pressed. His power had returned to its peak. He had a body again, and confidence. Yet he could not break its golden turtle shell, and that infuriated him. The standoff was clear. Dewey and the others could do nothing to Sauron while protected by the 24, and Sauron could do nothing to them. Worse for him, the 24's shield was not invulnerable only because Dewey had fused it to the ground. To strike the shield was to strike the earth itself. The world was vast and heavy, one could not easily sunder it. Even a Maya like Sauron was no match for such a burden. Frustrated, Sauron decided to abandon the attempt to break Dewey's defenses for the moment and pursue his greater purpose, reclaiming 12. He felt a gnawing unease. He could no longer sense the ring as he once had. The ring was linked to his life. If anything were wrong with it, it could mean his end. Turning away, he became a shadow of darkness and sped west. "Not good. He's going to Hogwarts," Dewey cried. Without hesitation, Dewey transformed into a phoenix and used fire teleportation. The phoenix's travel outpaced apparition or a portkey. In the next instant, Dewey stood atop Amon Sul, the highest point of Hogwarts Castle. Watching Sauron's black shadow advance, Dewey activated the 24. A massive golden dome blossomed, engulfing Hogwarts Castle and the village of Hogsmeade at its foot. The shadow Sauron had become struck the dome with a thunderous impact, sending ripples through the shield. The mountains shook, rocks tumbled, the Black Lake heaved, throwing up towering waves. Hogsmeade's residents were terrified by the violent shuddering and Sauron's palpable dread. Gandalf, Galadriel, Elrond, and the others hurried back by portkeys to reinforce the defense. But Sauron's assault suddenly ceased. He let out an anguished cry. "No! The ring isn't here at all!" His eyes burned red as he stared at Dewey, Gandalf, and the rest. "Where is the ring? Where have you hidden it? Why can I not feel its presence?" Dewey and the others fell silent, pouring their strength into containing Sauron. Thunderbird Zorando soared into the storm clouds and summoned 1,000 thunderbolts. Lightning hammered down on Sauron. The Kraken in the Black Lake strained to control the water, lofting monstrous waves that rose like a forest of tentacles to lash at him. Even Smaug the dragon sought revenge, hurling his hottest breath toward the Dark Lord. Sauron unleashed his most terrible power and wiped those assaults away in an instant. Except for Weathertop and Hogsmeade, safely cradled within Dewey's golden dome, the surrounding lands for dozens of miles became scorched and blasted. The Weatherhill's peaks were stripped bare, the Chetwood was reduced to a charred forest. Sauron's gaze seemed to pierce every mist as he fixed his eyes on Dewey and his allies. "The ring isn't in the west at all, is it?" he snarled. "You never meant to send it to Valinor. That was a ruse to draw me away. No, now the ring is in the east. Perhaps it has even been slipped into Mordor, borne to Mount Doom to be destroyed." Forward 6. Hold off Sauron. Sauron finally reacted. He stopped attacking Hogwarts and no longer wanted to be entangled with Dewey and the others. He wanted with all his might to return to Mordor and stop the One Ring from being destroyed. Elrond's face changed and he shouted, "He wants to return to Mordor. We mustn't let him leave." Sauron tore through the void, trying to escape through a spatial rift. Gandalf, Elrond, Galadriel, and Glorfindel threw themselves forward to intercept him, regardless of their own safety. Dewey gritted his teeth, withdrew the golden dome that had been guarding Hogwarts and Hogsmeade, and apparated to stand directly before Sauron. He channeled the power of the Ten and unleashed a golden light that coalesced around Sauron into a dome, trapping him inside. The Ten's golden dome was bound to the land and designed as a supreme defense. Dewey had remade it into a golden cage. Trapped, Sauron stopped holding back. He unleashed his most terrifying strength. A crushing spiritual pressure radiated outward. His will slammed into Dewey, Gandalf, Galadriel, and the others like an invisible hammer, leaving them pale as they resisted. Thick, dark energy erupted from him like volcanic fire, withering vegetation into ash, cracking stone with black fissures, and burning corrosive pits into the earth wherever it touched. The darkness gnawed at the golden light, trying to break the dome. Sauron swung his mace, wreathed in dark red flame, and smashed it against the dome. Each blow made the golden light ripple, shook the ground, and darkened the sky. Dewey, who was using his whole being to channel the Ten, suffered every strike as if it landed on his own body. He groaned, his face paling further. The Ten could draw on the land to form a near-perfect defense, but it demanded Dewey's entire magical output. Compared to himself decades ago, his power was vast, almost inexhaustible, but against Sauron it felt like a river against an ocean. The Ten could hold Sauron temporarily, but the magic in Dewey's body was being drained at a terrible rate, faster still as Sauron hammered the dome. Conservatively, Dewey could hold out for at most a day. All he could hope was that Frodo and the others would hurry to Mount Doom and destroy the One Ring. Gandalf and the others saw Dewey straining. Gandalf's voice was resolute. "We cannot let Sauron return to Mordor before the One Ring is destroyed. Even if it costs us our lives, we must keep him here." Casting caution aside about the corrupting risk to the 12, Gandalf poured its power into Dewey with everything he had, turning it into a warm, courageous tide that he poured into Dewey's body. He knew the longer he used the 12, the more it would be tainted, perhaps ruined, but if it bought time for the ring to be destroyed, he was willing to pay the cost. The infusion bolstered Dewey instantly. His strength returned, his magic swelled, and the golden dome solidified. Dewey estimated his endurance had roughly doubled. Elrond and Galadriel likewise committed their powers. Galadriel's 11 dispelled Dewey's fatigue and neutralized Sauron's spiritual pressure and the erosive dark power. Elrond's 13 linked Dewey to the natural magic of the world, letting a broad current of Earth's magic replenish the energy Dewey was losing. To everyone's surprise, the four elemental powers drawn by the rings reacted together. Air, water, fire, and earth combined into a primitive, balanced, pure energy that seemed capable of reshaping reality. Under that influence, Sauron's dark attacks simply dissolved without even making a ripple. The golden dome thickened and clarified into something like a translucent golden bell, locking Sauron inside. No assault could break it. At the center, where the four elements converged, Dewey underwent a profound transformation. Earth strengthened his body, fire tempered his spirit and soul, air broadened his magic, and water purified body, spirit, soul, and magic. The change surpassed even what he had gained from refining the Philosopher's Stone. Given time, he might leap to Maya-level power, breaking the shackles on his soul. Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel pushed the full one to draw the elements, air, water, fire, to meet the earth power of the 10 and assist Dewey's metamorphosis. Glorfindel watched, pleased. As wearer of the 10, any rise in Dewey's strength would be to their advantage. Sauron noticed, and alarm grew on his face. If Dewey ascended to Maya level, he would be far more dangerous than the restrained Maiar like Gandalf or Glorfindel. He would be a Maya unbound at the peak of his power. Desperate to return to Mordor and prevent the ring's destruction, Sauron could not allow that. "Since you use the earth to bind me, I will sever your link to the earth," he snarled, eyes flickering with evil fire. darkness drew back into his body, and his aura grew fiercer. With a roar, he condensed his power into his massive mace and smashed it down. The impact sent a thunderous boom through the land. The earth convulsed, mountains trembled, the sky dimmed. Eriador shook. Rivendell in the east, the Shire to the west, the Grey Havens, people across the region felt the ground move and feared a great earthquake. 407. Cracks in the earth rocks tumbled, birds and beasts took to flight, and panic spread like wildfire. In Hogsmeade, the settlement nearest Hogwarts and the heart of the fighting, most buildings collapsed. Wails and cries rose without stop. Ordinary people stared with the kind of terror reserved for the end of the world. The Ministry of Magic and the wizards were there, rescuing those not crushed by debris and treating them with healing magic and potions. Where Dewey and the others stood, the land looked as if a meteor had struck. The ground split with countless fissures radiating outward like a spiderweb. At the very center, where Dewey's earth prison held Sauron, a vast crater had sunk into the soil. Sauron stood in that pit, mace raised, and with all his strength slammed it into the ground. The earth shook again. A new fissure ripped open, a bottomless chasm. He struck again and again, each blow sending another quake through the plain. By the time he stopped, the land was torn and riddled with holes. Sauron's final strike opened a rift across the plains east of Weathertop. The scar ran north to south, a dozen meters wide and stretching for dozens of kilometers. From above, it looked as if Eriador itself had been cleaved in two. Even the Great East Road to Rivendell was severed, impassable without a newly built bridge. The rift appeared bottomless, as if it might reach the earth's core. Before Gandalf or the others could react, Sauron began to chant an ancient, dark incantation. The ground trembled continuously, and a deep rumble rose up from the rift. A fiery glow welled from the depths and surged toward the surface. "Not good, it's subterranean magma," Gandalf shouted, his face grim. Magma surged upward like a volcanic fountain. A heat wave rolled out first, smelling of sulfur. The air around them grew blistering, as if they stood on the rim of a volcano. Then the molten torrent itself roared up, billowing toward the surface with the force of an eruption. Sauron meant to use that subterranean fire to shatter Dewey's earth prison. The eruption, though hardly in the league of Mount Doom, was more than Dewey could easily resist, especially with Sauron driving the flow. If the magma broke free, it would turn the surrounding lands of Hogwarts into molten wasteland. Not only would trapping Sauron become impossible, but even suppressing the eruption would be extraordinarily difficult. Elrond moved first. Drawing on the lore of water, he swept all the Black Lake's waters into the rift, trying to smother the upwelling fire. But a single lake's worth of water was negligible against magma that had been building pressure for millions of years. The lake vanished in steam as the molten fountain continued to spout, the heat vaporizing every drop. The magma climbed like a geyser, carrying scalding force that threatened to swallow the plain. Dewey's earth prison widened rapidly, attempting to cover the rift and lock the magma back in. But the subterranean reservoir now had an outlet. Under that pressure, it was impossible to simply plug it. Dewey took soil and rock, and molding them with his geomancy, hurled them into the breach as stone bastions to stop the flow. The molten tide shattered and melted each one, folding the ruined fragments into itself. Influenced by Sauron's will, the magma grew more violent and restless. Gandalf poured forth his fire lore and heat binding, striving to calm the elemental fury within the magma. Galadriel used her waterborne arts and ancient will to counter the fire with water scents and soothing currents. Dewey was forced to abandon his own plan to ascend and transform. He poured every scrap of power from his geomancy into reinforcing the earth prison and forcing the rift to close. He felt the healing magic within him being consumed at an appalling rate. Teeth clenched, he persisted, silently praying that Frodo and the others moved faster. In the heart of Mordor, Frodo's group, disguised as orcs with polyjuice, had slipped past several checkpoints and reached the foot of Mount Doom. Smoke and ash hung constant over the slopes. There was no sign of life. Sauron, having learned Dewey's intention, had summoned the Ringwraiths and ordered every force he could spare to encircle Mount Doom, forbidding approach. The eye atop Barad-dûr watched the mountain like a perpetual spotlight. Not even an insect could enter unseen. Ringwraiths on fell beasts patrolled the skies, accompanied by vampires, dark-winged creatures, and Bane. On the ground, orcs, urukai, and trolls manned the perimeter. Giant spiders, wargs, dark sorcerers, evil spirits, and corrupted beasts prowled the inner slopes. Mount Doom had become an iron fortress, ringed and layered. There was no easy way in. Thus the Fellowship was forced to stop at the mountain's foot. Even disguised as orcs, they faced layers of inspection. Few orcs were allowed near the inner ranges, and those inspected were searched and searched again. If they slipped past those checks, the mountain itself was patrolled at every turn by wargs, evil spirits, and giant spiders. Above, ringwraiths, vampires, winged monsters, and Bane swept the skies in endless arcs. With the eye of Sauron keeping watch like a searching lamp, the Fellowship could hardly move an inch. Aragorn's face hardened. He lowered his voice. Sauron has likely discovered our intent and gathered most of Mordor's forces at Mount Doom. We don't know how long Dewey and the others can hold him back, but we must cast the ring into the volcano before Sauron returns. If he returns, we have no chance. Everyone's expression turned grave. But it's almost impossible to get into Mount Doom now, Legolas said, frowning. How do we get in? Patrols sweep the slopes. We could be detected at any moment. How can we reach the Cracks of Doom safely? The Cracks of Doom were a massive volcanic fissure within Mount Doom, a conduit of primal fire and lava rising from the Earth's core. It was that primordial fire that Sauron had used to bind most of his spirit to the ring, completing the forging of the One Ring, and it was the only place where the ring could be unmade. Aragorn stared up at the Watchers crowding the sky above Mount Doom, his brow drawn and his face heavy. After a long silence, he said in a low voice, "We must split up. 5 people plus Gollum is too conspicuous. Even if we get through the outer defenses and into the mountain, there's a very high chance we'll be discovered. So Legolas, Gimli, and I will be the ones to create chaos and draw their attention." Legolas and Gimli agreed at once. It meant taking the brunt of Mordor's forces and the greatest danger, but all of them were prepared to risk everything to destroy the One Ring. Gimli, wide-eyed with battle lust, shouted, "I haven't had a proper fight this whole way. I'm nearly bored to death. This is the perfect time to lop off a few more heads of those Mordor brats." Frodo's face went pale at the plan. "But that's far too dangerous for you. This is the heart of Mordor. Once you're exposed, it'll be deadly." Aragorn's voice was calm. He forced a small, reassuring smile. "Don't worry about us, Frodo. Legolas and I can apparate. Gimli's fighting strength is no joke. We can lead them on a chase. If things go badly, we also have a portkey we can use to get away from any overwhelming danger. Besides, the truly dangerous task is yours. Neither you nor Sam can apparate. On the way to the Cracks of Doom, you'll pass countless patrols. One mistake and you could be caught." Seeing Frodo's ashen face, Aragorn's concern deepened. "Frodo, can you still hold on?" The closer they came to Mount Doom, the more the ring's will pressed on Frodo. Though it sat sealed in a box and dampened for now, its influence grew as they neared the forge where it had been made. Frodo, still disguised as an ugly orc by the polyjuice, looked exhausted, pale, drawn, and under constant strain. "I'm fine. Don't worry about me," he said, forcing a smile that barely reached his eyes. The others exchanged helpless looks. None of them could truly share Frodo's burden. They did not have a hobbit's resistance to the ring. Sam wanted to take the ring from Frodo, but Frodo refused. He believed it was his duty. He hadn't yet reached his limit, and would only turn the task over when he truly could not continue. Having decided to split up, Aragorn drew his wand and said to Frodo and Sam, "There are countless enemies patrolling the mountain. Giant spiders and wargs prowl the ground. There are vampires, Bane in the sky, and ringwraiths on flying beasts. First, I'll cast a disillusionment charm on you. This enchantment will let you blend into the surroundings. It's not true invisibility, so you must be careful not to be seen." Even the charm had its limits. Sensitive beasts like the wargs could still catch an unfamiliar scent. Worse, the eye atop Barad-dûr might see through illusions entirely. Aragorn could only hope luck stayed with Frodo and Sam. To buy them that luck, Aragorn's group would create a diversion on the far side of the mountain, drawing attention, including the eye, away from the path to the Cracks of Doom. At that moment, Frodo remembered something and hurriedly pulled two small bottles of golden potion from his pouch, handing one to Aragorn. Is this Felix Felicis? Aragorn's face lit up with surprise. Frodo nodded, a little sheepish. Elsa's gave it to Uncle Bilbo and me for a birthday. She said it could grant luck. Uncle Bilbo gave me his bottle too. I forgot about it until now. I hoped it might help. Felix Felicis is a godsend, Aragorn said gratefully. It is exceedingly rare and difficult to brew. With this, our chances improve. There were two bottles, each with enough dose to last 24 hours. Frodo split one bottle with Sam. Each drank half and took 12 hours of luck. The other bottle was divided among Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli, giving each roughly 8 hours of fortune to go wreak havoc and attract attention. Gollum, of course, had no share. Gollum's usefulness had dwindled. Under the creature's terrified, pleading gaze, Aragorn struck him with a Petrificus Totalis. Once immobilized, Aragorn cast a disillusionment charm and hid Gollum under a secluded boulder. They had not killed him, only bound and concealed him, and that was mercy enough. Once the spell wore off, Gollum would be free, and whether he survived Mordor would be up to him. Once freed of their orc disguises, the polyjuice effects having worn off, Frodo and Sam donned a high-quality invisibility cloak and moved, guided by the sense of luck from the potion, to a thinly guarded spot where they could wait in silence. Their hobbit forms and short stature made them less conspicuous. The foul orc stench they'd been masked with had been washed away too. Otherwise, that alone would have drawn enemies. The cloak they used was not the legendary Dewey's cloak, but it was far better than ordinary invisibility cloaks on the market. Their small frames fit beneath it without leaving a trace. Meanwhile, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli continued to take polyjuice to keep their orc appearances and apparated to the far side of Mount Doom. They infiltrated the orc encampment there, exploited the friction between orcs and Uruk-hai, and set clever traps. Aragorn and Legolas quietly used magic to cast a Confundus charm and slipped a confounding brew into the food of both orcs and Uruk-hai, sowing chaos among them. Gimli, still in orc guise, joined the fray with relish, his axe chopping down several Uruk-hai. 409. Enter the volcano. The Uruk-hai had been bred by Saruman, a cross of orc and human blood that overcame ordinary orcs' weakness to sunlight. They were larger, stronger, and more brutal, scornful of the older orc breeds whom they considered inferior and defective. The orcs, proud of their ancient lineage from Morgoth and long service to Sauron, resented the upstart Uruk-hai. Clashes between the two had always been common, and under the quiet machinations of Aragorn and his companions, those tensions finally exploded into open slaughter. Both sides suffered heavy losses. When Aragorn's group seized the moment and killed the Uruk-hai leader and the orc chieftain, the fighting spiraled into even greater chaos. Around Mount Doom, orcs and Uruk-hai tore at one another in a mad bloodletting, weapons flashing, roars filling the air, attracting attention even from the great eye atop Barad-dûr. Frodo and Sam lay concealed behind a pile of rubble, wrapped in elven cloaks. From their hiding place, they watched the slaughter nearby. The cordon that had once blocked their way had quietly fallen apart. "Now," Frodo whispered. Seizing the chance, he and Sam slid from their cover and took advantage of the confusion, slipping between the fighting bands and beginning to climb the mountain. They skirted patrols and stuck to seldom-used paths, crawling where necessary to avoid being seen. Luck and caution kept them from encountering other enemies for a while, until they almost ran into a massive warg. Its bulk dwarfed a normal warg. A malevolent light flickered in its eyes, and a dark aura clung to its fur. Frodo and Sam froze, breath held, convinced they had been betrayed. The warg nosed the air, puzzled. Then the wind shifted, and a bitter, sulphurous reek from a nearby lava stream blew over them. The beast recoiled, and with a few long bounds, raced away. Only then did the two hobbits exhale and let their tense muscles loosen into aching stiffness. They pressed on, more careful than before, whispering nothing. Side by side and supporting one another, they crept upward under their cloaks, avoiding patrols of giant spiders and wargs, and keeping a constant watch on the sky for flying scouts, cribane, and fellbeasts. When the great eye swept over their section of the mountain, they flattened themselves into a crevice and held their breath until the danger passed. Every step demanded nerve. Every noise set their teeth on edge. Whether it was fatigue, fear, or some other influence, they pressed forward on a thread of hope. Their shelter turned out to be a dried lava tube, a narrow mouth that forced them to crawl flat at first, but which widened further in until they could stand and walk side by side. The tunnel ran inward and generally upward, a safer route than traveling the exposed slopes. In the gloom, Frodo produced a small lamp and lit its flame. Then together they threaded deeper into the molten carved passages. The lava tunnel was a wild thing, at times cavernous enough to hold thousands, at others so tight both hobbits had to slide through on their bellies. Some stretches bent upward at near vertical angles. Frodo and Sam stabbed Sting and a dagger into the rock and hauled themselves up, muscles burning by the time they cleared each incline. At a fork they hesitated. Choosing wrong could send them miles off course, but a faint, uncanny instinct guided Frodo, and they gritted their teeth and followed the path it suggested. While Frodo and Sam made their slow way through the mountain, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli kept a different kind of watch at the base of Mount Doom. They had unleashed and stoked the hostilities between Orcs and Uruk-hai to draw attention away from Frodo and buy him time. Unbeknownst to them, the Ringwraiths had forced an end to the fighting. The trio's disguises had been woven by polyjuice, which could fool most eyes and could not be undone even by strong magic, but it could not change what lay beneath a soul. The Ringwraiths, creatures of the shadowed world, saw in a different light. In their vision, elves glowed like starlight, dark races were shadow, and men were as they truly were. Hidden among the orcs, Aragorn, Legolas, and Gimli stood out like beacons, Legolas especially, shining with a holy radiance in the Ringwraith's eyes. "Seize them!" cried a Ringwraith from a fell beast high above, and the black voice chilled the air as it locked on the three below. Aragorn no longer hid. He flicked his wand and unleashed a confringo that blew a ring of orcs and Uruk-hai apart. Legolas, from his quiver, loosed a volley of enchanted bolts, spell bolts that struck the fellbeasts and made them shriek and plunge from the sky. Gimli, with no magic to call upon, lifted his axe and charged with a roar. The commotion drew the burning gaze of the Great Eye. Sauron's will, transmitted through that unblinking glare, ordered capture at all costs. Ringwraiths, wargs, vampires, trolls, Uruk-hai, and orcs swarmed toward Aragorn and his companions. The Eye, searching elsewhere after finding no sign of the ring on the three, flung its sight frantically over Mount Doom, hunting for any trace of Frodo. Winged scouts, Creebane and fellbeasts darkened the skies. On the ground, thousands of spiders, wargs, and wolves scoured every crevice. Sauron's reach stretched everywhere. When Sauron's chief monitor failed to find the ring on Aragorn's party, his attention snapped away and his rage surged. He sensed a threat to his greatest possession, and his mind closed on one terrible decision. In Dol Guldur and across the wide lands, the Dark Lord's power flared and wrestled against its bindings. You would destroy the ring? Never! The mad light of Sauron's fury poured from his being as the dark power within him lashed outward. A dreadful aura of destruction rolled from Sauron, and the mountain answered. The earth trembled. Rivers of lava boiled higher and higher. From afar, Gandalf watched the sky and the heaving ground, and his face went white. "Not good," he said sharply. "He's going to destroy himself."